Thanksgiving. I gotta clean this up from our last stream. Gotta resize everything. Move stuff around. There you go. That looks good. Alright. This is precisely where we stopped yesterday. Maybe. So Josh said something yesterday in chat. He said, oh no, we're not going to see Marsha get sanctioned. So maybe he knows something we don't know. Or, okay, you guys probably know. Maybe he knows something that I don't know. And we're about to see Marsha get sanctioned again today. Right, Josh? Nope, don't tell us. Spoilers.
We'll mark the transcript of the grand jury testimony of June 22nd, 1994 as defense exhibit next in order 1284, and the videotape will be marked defense 1285. I'm sorry, 1283. All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Shapiro.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. The next witness we would like to call is Mr. Joseph Bosco. We would like to call him for a very, very specific and limited purpose only. I talked to Mr. Bosco last week. Before he was subpoenaed, he agreed to accept service of subpoena and agreed that the article that he had published, that he had written, that was published in Penthouse magazine in the July issue, truly and accurately reflected a discussion he had, and the relevant part of that article that we wish to present to the jury is as follows.
Well, maybe we should all look up Penthouse. We should all look up that article for educational purposes. We should, just so we know.
That there has been enough leaking out there to sink Camp OJ if it were on a barge, by the defense and the prosecution alike. But both are pikers compared to the Los Angeles Police Department. It began last summer with the LAPD passing out 9/11 tapes to journalists as if they were courtesy trinkets, welcoming them to town, and reached its nadir with the, quote, DNA sock match story. Of the latter, I know this. Within 2 hours of Judge Ito admonishing the police for, quote, reckless disregard of the truth, LAPD's worst moment to that date, a certain police officer whose leaks had hitherto been mostly accurate and offered with corroboration, started calling journalists with the story that blood on the socks found in OJ's bedroom was a DNA match with Nicole's. This time, however, the officer offered no corroboration and became angry and defensive when asked. A number of journalists turned him down. Apparently, KNBC did not, and the rest is ugly history for both the press and the LAPD. We will call him only for the limited purpose of presenting to this jury the relevant testimony that the disinformation that was given was from a badged member of the Los Angeles Police Department who was acting in official capacity and for no other purpose.
Who was acting in an official capacity?
Well, was acting as an active member of the police department.
All right.
I don't think he can say that he was acting in an official capacity, but he was acting as a police officer, and that would be the limited purpose only of calling him.
All right. Have you consulted with his counsel?
Yes, I have, and they have no objection with that limitation.
All right. And do we have Ms. Osinski now present?
Yes, she is.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
All
I'm
right.
sorry, I was not privy to the conversation that just took place.
All right. Mr. Shapiro has just made an offer to the court of his purposes for calling Mr. Bosco. And Mr. Shapiro, would you repeat that for Ms. Osinski's benefit,
Yes.
please?
As I discussed with Ms. Osinski and Mr. Bosco, the limited purpose of calling Mr. Bosco is to authenticate an article that was published in Penthouse magazine that was authored by him that concerns information or disinformation, if you will, that was given to him by a member of the Los Angeles Police Department regarding a match of DNA for that purpose and for no other purpose.
All right, Ms. Osinski, what is the position of your client?
Your Honor, our position is, and it's in our papers, that Mr. Bosco is covered by the Shield Law. He would testify only as to published information. Basically, that would be that he's the author of the article, he's familiar with the article, and that it's a true and fair representation or account of what was said to him. Other than that, he will not testify as to any other information that is not published information as found in that article. And it's my understanding that Mr. Shapiro has indicated that they are willing to limit their questioning to that area. However, I have had no representation from the prosecution that they are also willing to limit any questions that they may have to that area. And therefore, I think that unless we have a stipulation to that effect, I think we need to have a discussion of the issues of the Shield Law or actually make a decision on Mr. Bosco's testimony if it will be restricted or not. Because we will be asserting the Shield Law as to any questions other than those about published information.
All right, what's the people's position?
Your Honor, first of all, counsel is sort of seems to be trying to ambush the people again, because they know that this whole issue of leaks was subject to two motions that the people wrote, one for Michelle Kessler and one on the issue of the leaks themselves. The defense has written a formal points and authorities. It's been argued by Mr. Ullman. It's been argued by myself. And they had previously represented that this testimony was going to be presented in a 402 type hearing as part of the considerations and the issues that were in front of Your Honor right now as to whether or not you were going to allow any evidence of the so-called leak to be presented, and also whether you were going to allow Michelle Kessler to be cross-examined as to that. So now all of a sudden they say they want right now to put this on in front of the jury, and they have previously not made that representation to the people. I think that all of these issues are currently under submission to the court. Also, I don't think this witness is on their witness list. Excuse me?
All right. Go ahead.
Your Honor, as to the substantive issues, and I don't believe we should be arguing the substantive issues yet, because it's premature, and the court first should make that ruling that the court said it was going to as to whether or not there is relevancy to this whole issue of the so-called leaks at all, which is also a predicate towards determining whether or not the Shield Law applies. But if the court were to somehow, and I don't think the court should do this, I hope Your Honor will not do this, somehow put those issues aside and in effect put the cart before the horse and now introduce this testimony before having ruled as to relevancy, which Your Honor took under submission, I'd like to make the following substantive comments. First of all, under the defense's own theory, they have stated that as to the issue of evidence planting, and they articulated this, and I previously argued this to the court, that leak information would only be relevant if it was made by someone in the Scientific Investigations Division who participated in analyzing the SOX. They said that. I gave that direct quote to the court previously. I don't have their points and authorities down with me right now, but they specifically stated that in framing the issues. Obviously, we can see that if some police officer somewhere, if it indeed was a police officer, found out information, obviously it would be secondhand. Let's try to make this concrete. Let's envision a police officer who happens to work in Parker Center and overheard. I'm making up a scenario just for illustration purposes. Overheard Detective Lang and Detective Van Adder talking in the elevator, and they said that there had already been DNA testing on the SOX. And this police officer immediately ran to the phone and leaked this information to Mr. Bosco. Or maybe he misunderstood the information that he overheard. What would the relevance of that be? What would the relevance be that this officer, Officer X, had overheard this information and had leaked it? It doesn't go to the issue of planting. It doesn't go to any of the issues that the defense claimed to be relevant. And it isn't relevant under the theories that they specifically articulated in their written papers in front of the court. It just doesn't have anything to do with this case whatsoever. We have argued that even if it were an SID criminalist who was involved, it wouldn't be relevant to this case because it does not tend to show that that person was involved in planting evidence on the SOX. But if it's just some police officer, it's far more tenuous. So it is impossible to conceive of any relevant theory of this evidence. Okay, next. let's say that Mr. Bodsko gets up on the witness stand and merely authenticates this article, which is what Mr. Shapiro is suggesting be done. First of all, this article has numerous conclusions and opinions in it that are not relevant and not admissible. For example, the opinions that there have been numerous leaks by both sides and that the Los Angeles Police Department makes the other sides appear to be pikers. And most importantly, he says that this leak was to journalists, that he started calling journalists with the story. So we know for certain that what Mr. Bodsko is referring to here is he is referring to conversations that presumably he has had with other journalists. So we know that at least part of the story is predicated upon double hearsay. In other words, what journalists represented to him, this police officer represented to them. What we don't know is whether all of the story is predicated upon hearsay. In other words, we can't be sure simply upon reading these paragraphs that were read into the record whether simply part of the story is predicated on double hearsay or whether their entire story is predicated upon double hearsay. So we have a hearsay problem that appears to be insurmountable. The next problem that we have legally with this story is we have an authentication problem. Let's imagine that this conversation with Officer X, if there was a conversation, took place over the phone. What the court would require is in order for that conversation to be admissible, the witness who is testifying to the conversation to authenticate the conversation by saying, I spoke to Officer X, I recognized his voice because I've spoken to him on numerous occasions in person, and I recognized the voice over the phone to be the same as that which I've heard in previous conversations. Further, I know this individual to be a police officer with the Los Angeles Police Department because I've seen his badge and his identification, because I've seen him in uniform, or however the case may be. But the point is that authentication would be required, and we don't have any authentication whatsoever here stated in this article. We don't have anything that comes close to being authentication. And then finally, from a legal perspective, the people have a right to cross-examine any witness that gets up on the witness stand that is offered by the defense. And although it has been said that the shield law is not a privilege, it clearly is analogous to a privilege. And some people have characterized it as being a privilege.
I think the case law is pretty clear that all it is immunity from being held in contempt. That's all it is.
Well, yeah, it's been characterized as being immunity from being held in contempt. And then there's some case authority to indicate that independent of the shield law, there's also some sort of First Amendment constitutional right to protect confidential information and news sources that could be conceivably analogized to a privilege. But the point is Your Honor, if a witness were to get up on the witness stand and testify, they have waived any privileges that they have to the full extent of relevant cross-examination. For example, let's say a defendant gets up on the witness stand and testifies in the case, and the people want to ask him about 1101B type evidence relating to a pending criminal charge.
This is not real relevant, counsel.
Well, no, I'd like to explain it, Your Honor. Obviously, this is extremely important to the people, and we would like the opportunity to be heard on all the relevant legal issues.
Well, discussing an indirect analogy of cross-examination of a defendant on 1101B evidence is an interesting issue.
Well, the point
But
is
it has
that
nothing to do with this issue.
no. Well, we have California case law that says that we can cross-examine, even if the person invokes their Fifth Amendment privilege as to the pending charges, because he has waived his privilege to the full extent of relevant cross-examination. And I don't see why that same rule wouldn't be equally applicable in the context of the so-called shield law, whether you're going to call it a privilege or an immunity, that once that witness has gotten up on the witness stand and has testified to anything voluntarily, that the other side has the right to cross-examine them to the full extent of relevant cross-examination, and therefore any privilege or immunity that he would otherwise have has been waived to the full extent of
But your
relevant
analogy
cross-examination.
fails because neither Mr. Bosco or Mr. Savage are here voluntarily.
Well,
Both have filed motions to quash subpoenas. I mean, that's a huge difference in that
it's-
thought process.
It's been represented, though, that Mr. Bodsko would be willing to authenticate this article voluntarily. And if he did that, our position is that we get to cross-examine him to the full extent of relevant cross-examination. So he can't get up on the witness stand and says, well, everything I say in here is true. Well, Mr. Bodsko, how do you know that this person
Happy
was a police
Thanksgiving,
officer?
Zach.
I invoke the shield law. Have you ever talked to this person in person before? I invoke the shield law. Did you recognize his voice? I invoke the shield law. We have to be allowed to cross-examine. The court couldn't permit a situation to stand where a witness got up on the witness stand and testified to certain information and then foreclose the cross-examiner from cross-examining that individual to the full extent of the relevant cross-examination that was opened by his direct testimony. And that's my point, Your Honor. Let me just take a look at this note to see whether there's something else I wanted to bring up. I just point out on the hearsay issue that I previously mentioned that there's obviously no fundamental indicia of reliability or trustworthiness to this article itself.
In fact, wouldn't you say quite the contrary, given the result?
Well, yes, clearly. And aside from the results, Your Honor, there's the issue of whether other journalists would be revealing their sources to a fellow journalist in such sufficient specific detail that he could tell that they were all referring to the same police officer. So there's a lot about this that is unreliable. So in sum, Your Honor, we would ask the court, as the court has previously ruled, to take under submission the issue of relevancy and to first make a ruling as to whether that initial threshold requirement has been met. Then and only then, if the court has made that ruling, do we then need to sort through some of these other very difficult legal issues relating to hearsay, relating to authentication, and relating to the right of the people to cross-examine the witness who is authenticating this kind of material.
All right. Bureau?
Thank you very much, Your Honor. The first issue is whether or not Mr. Bosco can be called to testify and whether or not he can invoke the Shield Law to prevent his testimony. He has already indicated to me, and his counsel has indicated to me, that as a result of his previously published article, to that extent and to that extent only, he has no legal right to exert the Shield Law, and therefore that testimony is not protected testimony. Thus, we are limiting our inquiry within the scope of the privilege. We are not going to call Mr. Bosco or ask him anything that would be covered by the Shield Law, potentially. And that's all his counsel has suggested. His counsel has not suggested that the people be prevented from cross-examining, nor would I ever suggest that. They can cross-examine on evidence and on material that is relevant to the direct examination, but they cannot go beyond that. And that's all we're saying. They could certainly make every inquiry they want as to whether or not Mr. Bosco was assured that the person he was talking to was a police officer, that he knew he was a police officer. That's an issue, and there would be no objection. The question is the identity of that person. And we have told Mr. Bosco and his counsel, in Your Honor, that for the purpose of this witness, we are not going to make that inquiry. So the arguments made by Mr. Goldberg in that regard are without merit. The second argument, that it's hearsay, is an argument that the court addressed and dismissed, I think, very quickly, and that is this is not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, quite the contra. It's being offered to show that it was not true, and it was put out as some type of disinformation to show that there was, in fact, a match when Ms. Clark told Your Honor in court there was no DNA match. And then the next day that was reported by reporter Savage, that there still was a match, and that was still coming from a reliable source. And our intention now is to demonstrate to the jury, for their consideration, the following facts. That prior to any DNA analysis, a member of the Los Angeles Police Department who had previously had contact with Mr. Bosco, who had previously given him corroborated information, and information reliable enough so that Mr. Bosco would go ahead with this story, was told, according to Mr. Bosco, that the evidence on the sock of blood was a match. And that's what he reported. We know that was not true because Ms. Clark came to court the very next day and on the record told Your Honor that was not true. There was no DNA match since no DNA testing had taken place yet. That night, again, after the court made a very stern admonition and made its feelings known that there had been no DNA analysis, that reporter Savage again reported that story. This is something now for the jury to decide, was this a self-fulfilling prophecy on behalf of the Los Angeles Police Department who gave this information, we know, to Mr. Bosco, and hopefully we will be able to show with the court's concurrence that this officer also gave this information to Ms. Savage. And that is something for the jury to consider. It is relevant evidence. It is highly material evidence. It is not covered by any privilege. Mr. Bosco is not going to assert any privilege, nor could he under the law. It's not that he's waiving anything. It is that if material is already published, it is not covered by the Shield Law. The Shield Law protects areas that have not been published. That is the very essence and purpose of that rule. So I think on every issue, it is very clear that the material that we seek is relevant, that Mr. Bosco will testify to it, that we will limit our testimony so that he in no way is being asked to invade any privilege of confidentiality.
Zach, thank you
and that
so
the jury will then
much.
have relevant information
Thank
before it to
you.
make a determination in this case. Thank you.
Ms. Osinski,
So-
do you have any brief response?
Yes, Your Honor. Actually, Mr. Sullivan.
What does it matter what was published? Like, that's not in front of the jury. They can't read the papers. I'm just saying who you got. Steve Bennett. Yeah, what does it matter if it was published anywhere? I mean, I don't see how that has anything to do with the trial.
Sullivan was prepared to argue this motion, and we were told that we would be arguing before the court at 4 today, and he's on his way here. I feel this has been sort of sprung on us at the last moment, and I want to reiterate that Mr. Bosco will invoke the Shield Law as to any unpublished information. And I'd like to clarify something Mr. Shapiro said. It's not areas of unpublished information. Or areas of not covered by published information. It's actual unpublished information. The only thing Mr. Bosco will testify to is the accuracy of that article. He will not go beyond that article, and he will not identify his source. It's a confidential source. I believe there's a declaration before the court that accompanies our motion that indicates that. The Shield Law will apply, and if he is asked any questions on cross-examination or any questions on direct examination by the defense on any matter that is not specifically stated in the article, he will invoke the privilege. And I think we're going to get into a little bit of an issue as to whether, he can be forced to testify on those matters. And I think it's better to be resolved out of the presence of the jury than to put him on the witness stand and get into this in front of the jury, because I do believe there's going to be a problem. His testimony, we argue, is very limited and very restricted. And I agree with Mr. Shapiro in that he cannot move to quash the subpoena based on published information. And he will testify as to that, but that's very limited. And certainly what we've been advised is that he would be only asked about questions with regard to a particular paragraph in that article. Now the prosecution indicates that they may be going into other areas of that article, and it might involve opinions and conclusions. And Your Honor, that's a whole other issue. As to, they cannot go into, or they can go into it. We would have Mr. Bosco invoke the Shield Law as to the basis for forming some of his opinions or his conclusions, or how anything that related to any conversations and contact they may have had with any persons in the article that's not expressly stated in the article. And I think it's fine for Mr. Shapiro to say that he's going to limit his questioning or to published information. However, that does not take into account what the prosecution may do, or if Mr. Shapiro feels that based on a certain answer he might want to go delve further into the article and into matters that are not published.
All right.
And Your Honor, I may just briefly ask that we be allowed to present a full argument on this issue at 4 o'clock when originally scheduled.
You don't think that was sufficient?
Well,
Are there any issues or defenses other than the Shield Law that you can raise to non-published information?
well, there's the First Amendment, Your Honor, but I'm not prepared to discuss it at the moment because, as I say, Mr. Sullivan was preparing the argument in this matter, and I was not.
All right, well, I wish you had told me that you wanted to reserve that right rather than talking to me for the last 10 minutes and
Well,
telling
Your
me you
Honor,
want to
I was
argue
simply
again.
advised that Mr. Shapiro was discussing Mr. Bosco's
No, you should have started
testimony.
your comments by asking to continue the matter for hearing until 4 o'clock. That's how we should have started the conversation.
Well, I apologize to Your Honor for that. I find myself in the middle of something, and I do apologize, but I believe Mr. Sullivan can better present the issues. He's been preparing to do that.
All right, well, don't misunderstand me, Ms. Osinski. You and Mr. Sullivan have appeared in court with very short notice, and I understand your need for time to prepare. But since now I'm going to have to hear these arguments twice from Mr. Bosco's counsel. All right, I agree that Mr. Sullivan, if he is the person who's prepared for the argument, I'll hear his argument at 4 o'clock since that was the time originally scheduled. Let me tell you what my tentative ruling is at this point. I'm going to allow Mr. Bosco to be called for the purposes of a 402 hearing, a foundational hearing, determine, one, whether or not he is somebody who is covered by the Shield Law. That has to be established for the record. Then the discussion as to what it is the defense wishes to glean from him from that article that he's willing to discuss, and then whether or not either on direct or cross-examination by the prosecution, if the question is asked who this individual was who provided him with the information, if he invokes the shield law, then I know that out of the presence of the jury. And then I will take this matter under submission likewise with the Tracy Savage situation, because we'll be in the same boat as far as that is concerned. All right. Let's take a 15-minute recess, and then we'll discuss the Gertie's issue. Might as well use the time. All right. Also in the interim, I'm going to excuse the jury from further service until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. All right. Back on the record in the Simpson matter. Mr. Simpson is again present before the court with his counsel, Mr. Cochran and Mr. Scheck. People represented by Mr. Clark. Jury is not present. Counsel, anything we need to take up before we launch back into this?
Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning, Mr. Cochran.
Good seeing you, Your Honor. It's a good day. You don't seem to share my view of that. Judge, I wanted to just indicate to you that Mr. Sullivan is present, and I indicated to him that I do not believe we'll be calling Mr. Bosco today. We're going to be waiting Your Honor's ruling at any rate. And he is in Orange County, and I've assured him that he would have at least a half day's notice before we would call him, and I wanted to make sure that was all right, so he's free to leave at this point.
Yes.
All right. Very good.
All right, thank you,
Your Honor.
counsel. All right, anything else we need to take up before we launch into Dr. Reeder's? Mr. Walsh, good morning, sir.
The defense served on the City of Los Angeles. A subpoena deuce is taken with a return set for today. I've filed a motion to quash that subpoena this morning. If the court is going to hear that, I'll wait. Otherwise, I'll come back whenever you want to hear argument on it.
All right, Mr. Cochran, when do you want to hear this? This was just presented to me about 2 minutes ago. I had not had the opportunity to read it.
And I understand, Your Honor. We do want to get to the jury as soon as possible. I would like to have this heard as absolutely as soon as possible, Your Honor. I'd indicated to counsel in this search for truth. I'm surprised they made this motion, but they have. But I want to resolve it as soon as possible. We want these documents. So whatever, as soon as you said it.
I'm still working on the Shield matter,
Yes, I appreciate that. Your Honor.
which, although this is related to that.
Yeah, right. This should come right behind that, don't you think? I suppose.
All right. Today being Wednesday, August 2nd. How about if we take this up Friday morning, August 4th,
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock?
That's fine.
Thank you, Your Honor. That'll be fine.
All right. Thank you, counsel. All right. Anything else before we invite the jurors to rejoin us?
Just related to the boards, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Clark, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Your Honor. I don't know where the boards are at the moment.
Whatever's easiest, probably the easel over by the jury box, easiest to see. Just have it quiet in the courtroom, please. All right, this is a board, title of which is Percent of Contamination by Control, May through July 1994.
Yes. The court may recall we had informal discussions with the court last week about these various boards, and what I'm going to direct my comments to are simply 4 charts, for lack of a better term, that detail percentages of contamination. And if the court will recall, they describe contamination as a percentage of typing strips as well as a percentage of runs, or PCR hybridization runs. I'm sorry, PCR runs themselves. And the objection I have to each of them is as to their argumentative nature. Now this one, for instance, is labeled percent of contamination by control. And I think when this is presented in this type of chart form, and this one refers to negative amplification controls as well as extraction controls, that when this chart's used in that fashion, I think it really constitutes closing argument, as opposed to a legitimate use of a chart with a witness in front of the jury. Now, I think what may be most expeditious is if I show the court each chart and then address any further comments.
All right. All right, the next chart is entitled Runs Percent with Contamination by Month, May 1993 through August 1994. Is in terms of percent. Along the bottom axis, it appears to be ordered by month, May 93 till August 94. Underneath that are what appear to be fractions, which are probably the actual number of runs, the raw data. All right, let's see the next one. All right, third one is strips, percent of contamination and/or artifacts by month, May 1993 through August 1994. Again, in terms of percent, with the bottom axis being monthly, with a fraction representing the raw data.
And then one more, Your Honor.
These are very nice, Mr. Scheck. You're welcome. All right, the last one is runs and strips, excuse me, percent of contamination and/or artifacts.
That probably should be entitled on the top, May through July, 1994. Well, we didn't put the dates on there. Maybe I'll have to spoil the presentation of it by writing in by hand, May through July, 1994 on the top. I didn't notice that. This is the bracketed period.
All right.
The reason I believe these charts are argumentative to the point that they should not be utilized during the presentation is the
Excuse me.
fact-
Next time you go through those doors, you catch the doors. All right?
is I believe they're argumentative because, in particular, because of the use of the terms contamination and artifacts. It's our belief that Dr. Gerdes will concede that in many, if not most instances, what's alleged to be contamination, he will concede may not be contamination. So consequently, in the course of presenting this type of information, with the use of the term contamination and artifacts, I think it's argumentative to the point that it shouldn't be used during the presentation with a witness. I think it's the type of material that may be appropriate in closing argument, but I think to utilize that in front of a jury will again run a substantial risk of both misleading and confusing the jury due to its argumentative nature of these four charts.
All right. Mr. Schick?
We did go over these on last Friday, and these boards are in precisely the same form as we all viewed them last Friday, except that we added over the bottom, as I indicated to you, the raw numbers. What these represent are Dr. Gerdes' findings. He will explain, as we've discussed at length, by showing the actual strips and explaining what is meant by an artifact, which ones those apply to, and the basis of his finding that there is a contaminant on a run. And these charts are simply, without argument, listing his findings, just as the boards that the prosecution put up list their findings. So this is what is, in his opinion, a scientific fact. That's going to be his testimony, and they're free to attack it. So it's simply a record of his findings, his table, which has been turned over to the prosecution, his run notes. These are his findings.
All right.
Just so, out of completeness, Mr. Clark did not mention the other boards which they should put up by the Elmo.
Well, if he's not objecting to them, I don't want to see them.
Okay. I think that, that basically constitutes
All right, the issue here is
argument.
the word contamination.
Yes. And the Dr.
Would you
Gerdes...
address Mr. Clark's specific point that Dr. Gerdes doesn't specifically say that or doesn't say that quite to that extent?
Oh, what he is going to do, and we're going to explain it with specific terms, and that's the reason that we made a distinction between this first board that is runs versus strips and the second board, which is just runs, is he's going to explain what is meant by an artifact. That is to say that on the when you see a 1.1 allele, and we're going to show the strips with the 1.1 allele and no 1 out of the user guide, that could be the DX gene and is an artifact. Then we are going to explain by the use of breaking them down as chart by chart. In other words, we're going to do it by allele. This is the 1.1 allele, same presentation by month. These are the strips. This is the underlying data
No,
from this
Mr.
chart.
Scheck, my specific question was,
Yes.
Mr. Clark's statement that Dr. Gerdes will say that it is not, it could be contamination, it could be something else.
Right. That is exactly what this chart is going to represent. He is going to indicate with the breakdown by allele that what this represents, and he's going to give the specific breakout of numbers, is that on the strips, these percentages represent contamination and artifacts, and he will break down the numbers. On the runs, he's saying that within that run there's a contaminant. He's going to break down each of these things and explain his findings. And he's going to say that when you have a situation where it's ambiguous, that is to say that there is a 1.1 dot showing up in the presence of a 1, and that could be contamination, it could be an artifact in those limited situations. We're going to break it down and explain the underlying constituents of this board to the jury. So it's not argumentative, it's simply showing the percentages in terms of exactly what his testimony is going to be.
All right. Any other response, Mr. Clark? No. All right, the objection's overruled. All right, let's have the jury, please. Looking at your CV, I would have stayed in Hawaii. All right, let the record reflect that we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Mr. Scheck, you may call the defense next witness.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Your Honor, the defense calls Dr. John Gerdes.
Sir, can you please raise your right hand? You just solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause now being before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please have a seat and state the still your first and last name for the record.
John Gerdes, John Gerdes.
All right, doctor, would you just lean back and pull the microphone close to you, please?
Thank you.
Put the books down.
All right, Mr. Scheck.
Dr. Gerdes, could you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what your present position is?
I'm the clinical director of a company called Immunological Associates of Denver, IAD for short.
And you say you're the clinical director there. Do you hold any other positions?
Yes, I actually have 3 titles. The clinical director, the director of DNA paternity testing, and the director of research and development.
And could you tell us what kind of a company IAD is and what it does in the Denver area?
Yes. Immunological Associates of Denver is a reference laboratory for the purpose of supporting transplantation, organ transplantation. We do the HLA typing, which is used to match the organs, solid organs and bone marrow of donors to recipients. We do clinical testing to ensure that those particular donors of organs are free of infectious agents. And we do paternity testing for the purpose of legal conflicts.
In your work, do you use the technique known as PCR or polymerase chain reaction?
I do.
In your work, do you use the technique known as RFLP or restriction fragment length polymorphism analysis?
Yes, we do.
Now, I'd first like to discuss with you your clinical work. You indicated
Oh, I'm
that
getting hungry, guys.
IAD does
Are you guys
transplant
getting
work
hungry?
in the Denver area. Incidentally, how many hospitals are there in the Denver area?
I'm not sure how many. There are 4 hospitals that we work specifically with that do transplants.
And so for those 4 hospitals, your lab is the one that does the typing for purposes of the transplantation.
That's correct.
First, I'd like you mentioned bone marrow transplants. I'd like you to explain for us exactly what that is and what your work entails.
Well, the major reason an individual would need a bone marrow transplant is if they had cancer, for instance, and leukemia or other kinds of cancer. When a person needs a bone marrow transplant, it's critical that you have an exact match of the immune system of the donated marrow to the recipient, or they will reject the donation. So a registry has been formed by what's called the National Marrow Donor Program, and individuals can basically donate a blood specimen which is typed, and that HLA type is then recorded. They're put on this list, which is a registry, and then if an individual has cancer and needs a bone marrow transplant, the registry can be searched to find an exact match.
Let me stop you right there. When you say that, so a donor, somebody would sign up to be part of the bone marrow registry and gives a blood specimen, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, you say that it's typed. Who does that, and what technique do you use to do it?
Well, this is a national program, the National Marrow Donor Program. They contract laboratories that do the typing, and it's done by PCR-based DNA methodology.
And are you one of those contract laboratories that is IAD?
Yes, IAD is one of those laboratories.
And so you do the PCR-based typing to type the donors who are in the registry?
The recipients.
The recipients, I'm sorry.
No, donors in the registry.
Right.
You're right.
First the donors, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, what happens next?
Well, an individual with cancer needs it's determined that they need a bone marrow transplant, and so that particular individual with cancer would be typed, again by DNA PCR-based methods.
By your lab?
By our lab, in the Denver area at least. The patients in the Denver area would be typed by our lab. And then the registry would be searched to determine if a match could be found. And at that point, both individuals are retyped to double check that everything was correct, and they would proceed with the bone marrow transplant.
And your role is to supervise that these 3 different stages of typing are done correctly, and then when you indicate that everything matches, you essentially give the go-ahead.
That's correct.
And that's now, what kind of system are you using for this typing? Is that the HLA system?
Yes.
What is it? Could you explain to the jury what that is?
HLA stands for human leukocyte antigen, and that particular gene system is the one that's critical for immune recognition.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Objection, no foundation, this one.
And so that is the critical gene that needs to be matched in order to prevent the recipient from rejecting the marrow donor.
Now, we've had a lot of testimony in this case about the DQ alpha reverse dot blot system that
Yes.
was used by, I guess, the 3 different laboratories in this case, the Los Angeles Police Department, the Department of Justice, and Cellmark. Is the DQ alpha system in some way related to the HLA system that you use?
Objection, no foundation.
Yes, that particular gene is one of the HLA genes. It's actually a cluster of genes all on chromosome 6. It involves DQ alpha, DQ beta, DR alpha and beta, and DP.
So DQ alpha is just one of those systems on each HLA?
Right, it's a subtype that's in that same cluster.
Okay. Now, besides bone marrow transplants, you mentioned that your laboratory does solid organ transplants.
That's that we do the typing for them, yes.
Could you explain for the jury how that works?
The situation in a solid organ transplant is that we don't have as much time. So basically, an unfortunate individual may have an accident and then be declared brain dead, and at that point, we have 4 to 6 hours to type that particular individual, and then there is again a registry of individuals waiting for solid organs transplants, and then we would contact that individual and proceed with the transplant. But you have the difference is you have a 4 to 6 hour window of time in which to basically do 2 things. One, we need to type by HLA to be sure that we match correctly, and the second thing we need to do is we need to screen the donor for dangerous infectious agents. You don't want to obviously give someone an organ from an individual who is infectious, so you would have to screen for such things as HIV, which causes AIDS, hepatitis, HTLV, and a variety of infectious agents that it's important to be sure the donor did not have an infection with those agents so it doesn't transfer it.
When you say solid organs, what are we talking about here? What organs? Heart?
We're talking about kidney, heart, lung, pancreas, liver.
So, in other words, like I guess Mickey Mantle, the sports star, recently had a transplant.
That's correct.
But in the Texas area.
That's right.
But your role is if it happened in Denver, your laboratory would have been doing all the typing and looking at the registries.
That's correct.
Objection, speculation also leading.
Now, you were talking about typing for these infectious diseases that the donor might have, such as HIV, HTLV, hepatitis B and C. Are you yet using PCR techniques for that aspect of the solid organ transplant typing process?
No.
What work are you doing in that area?
Well, as one of my functions as the Director of Research and Development, we are attempting to validate PCR-based methods to look for those infectious agents. At the present time, we use what are called serological methods, which look for the antibody. And that simply says that an individual has been previously exposed and therefore might be infectious. Those types of assays are available. They're
What do you mean by
FDA-approved.
assay? When you
An
use-
assay is a test,
Okay.
a method.
Mhm.
Those are FDA approved and available. What we would like to do, though, is look directly for the infectious agent. That's certainly the better way to do it. And PCR is an exquisitely sensitive method and therefore has the potential of looking directly for the infectious agent. The difficulty is basically twofold. Number one, the time frame that we have, the 5 to 6 hours, most of the highly sensitive PCR methods take a little longer than that, usually overnight. So we need to develop a system that has the ability to detect very small amounts of virus in a very short period of time.
Let me stop you right there. You say very small amounts of virus. What is it? Is a virus just a string of DNA?
A virus is essentially DNA that's wrapped up in a protein coat.
And when you say small, we've had a lot of testimony here about nanograms and then a smaller unit of that, picograms. What levels are you talking about here?
The picogram or lower.
All right, and
It-
could you just define for the jury the difference between a picogram and a nanogram of DNA?
well, there are 1,000 picograms in a nanogram.
Okay. So you're looking at very small amounts of DNA for these different infectious viruses and trying to develop a PCR technique that can deal with it. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the first problem is being able to detect a very small amount. The second problem is being able to ensure that that can be done reliably, and that is so that you don't have what are called false positives or false negatives. A false negative would mean that an individual might have a small amount of virus and for whatever reason we missed it. And that would be disastrous because then the organ would be transplanted and someone would unfortunately come down with infection. The false positive would be a situation where, because the technique is so sensitive, sometimes DNA from the laboratory or DNA from wherever, from previous amplifications, for instance, in the lab, might get into the tubes that we're using to test the donor.
I think we're exceeding the scope of this question, Counsel.
What is, simple question.
Okay.
Is contamination an issue that you're trying to deal with in developing this particular PCR technique?
It is.
Let's move on to the next thing that your lab does. You mentioned after the transplants are performed, does your laboratory do something with respect to infectious disease screening?
We do.
And what is that you do?
Well, once a patient has received a transplant, and that's either solid organ or bone marrow, they have to undergo what's called immunosuppression in order for us to prevent rejection. And so these individuals, their immune response is not quite as good as a normal individual, and they therefore have an increased susceptibility to infectious agents. So there are certain infections that a normal individual or an individual who hasn't been immunosuppressed would not be susceptible to, wouldn't cause a problem in any way. But in these individuals, it can kill them. And the primary example of that is something called cytomegalovirus.
CMV for
CMV for short. And this particular infection, all of us, or at least 80% of us, have seen this infection at some time early in life. And it's not a problem until you receive a transplant. And at that point, it can become an active infection again, cause pneumonia, and kill the patient. So it's a very, very difficult virus to deal with. It's also a difficult virus to grow. It takes 6 weeks to grow it in a lab, so that's not going to be helpful.
Dr. Goodies?
PCR is the best way to look for it.
Have you developed a PCR technique to detect the cytomegalovirus CMV virus?
Yes,
All right. And did you receive a grant to do that?
I did.
And when did you receive that grant?
I believe it was in 1990. Correct me if I'm wrong.
And what did that grant entail? Who did you study?
We studied 48 renal transplant, that's kidney transplant patients, and looked at them in a way that we could validate
Marty,
a PCR-based
and a
method for the purpose of
banana. Happy
diagnosing early
Thanksgiving.
detection of the CMV virus.
Is that PCR technique working with very small quantities of DNA?
It is.
Is that PCR, is contamination
You
a
had
problem
pecan
in
pie
the
last
development of this
night, you
technique?
cheater.
Contamination is a problem in the development of any PCR technique.
Now, you indicated that you were working, you were head of research and development at IAD. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Have you, and I suppose part of that research and development was your work in developing this technique, this PCR technique to detect the CMV virus?
That's correct.
All right. Have you recently received any other grants relating to the PCR technique and the issue of contamination that would be relevant to share with the jury?
Yes, I have.
Could you tell us what that is?
Well, just this last month, I received a grant from the Advanced Technology Program, which is a division of the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and the purpose of that grant is to develop a new diagnostic technique that's going to be more cost-effective and less complex, and allow for a better way to prevent contamination.
Was this, what is the National Institute of Standards and Testing, or NIST?
National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Technology, what is it?
It's a department, and I'm not sure what major department it's under, of the U.S. government. And they're charged with the purpose of developing technology that will be important to the U.S. in the future in terms of keeping the U.S. at the forefront of technologies and maintaining the U.S. as a competitive country.
Was this a competitive grant?
It was.
How many companies applied for this, do you know?
This was a focus program specifically asking for grants on DNA. I believe there were 27 applicants.
What was the amount of the grant that you just received?
$1.6 million.
You also indicated that your laboratory does paternity testing.
Yes.
All right, and could you tell us what technique you use and what's involved in that?
Yes, in paternity testing, we use the other type of DNA testing, which is called RFLP, which I believe you've all heard of, restriction fragment length polymorphism. And that technology then is used for our purpose of determining whether whether an individual is the father of a child.
Now, in the...
Whoa. Hold on a second. Which I believe you've all heard of. Witnesses are not allowed to listen to the trial. Remember? They're not allowed to. The defense made a huge deal of it. This is the defense's witness. How would he possibly know what everybody has all heard of? Cheaters.
paternity testing area, do you have to deal with, do you have guidelines with respect to handling of specimens and chain of custody issues such as that?
Yes, we do.
Finally, does your lab do any work in what is known as virology?
Yes, we do.
And does any of that involve PCR?
The CMV is a virus, and so that involves PCR. We also look for another organism called chlamydia. It's actually not a virus, but it is a microorganism that causes sexually transmitted diseases. And our function as a virology lab is to look at infections not restricted only to infections in transplant population, but in the OB population or other populations as well, wherever they would need it. And that's one of the particular organisms where we use PCR.
And is there a particular kit that's used with that PCR application?
Yes.
And who approved that kit?
Well, it's an FDA-approved kit.
What's the FDA?
The Food and Drug Administration. And for clinical testing, if you use a kit, it has to be approved by that organization. And basically
Excuse me
what
for
that...
1 second. A kit. Is the PCR DQ alpha technique being used here, is that a kit as well?
It is.
Now, does the kit that you use for chlamydia, does that have a contamination control?
It does.
Called UNG?
Yes.
And does the DQ alpha system have the UNG?
No.
Now, Doctor, I'd like to talk a little bit about your educational background. Where did you get your undergraduate degree?
I received a Bachelor of Science in Microbiology from the University of Wyoming, in Laramie, Wyoming.
And where did you get your postdoctorate degree?
I received my PhD from UCLA in Los Angeles in the field of microbial genetics and bacterial pathogenesis. And microbial genetics is what is now called molecular biology.
And how many years did it take you to get your PhD, sir?
4 years.
And in microbiology, your background, what is the importance of something known as aseptic technique, and could you explain what that is to the jury?
Well, aseptic technique or sterile technique is the foundation of microbiology, really. It is a basically teaching you the common sense of how to handle an item, a specimen, in such a way that you can look at what's only in a specimen and not worry about other microorganisms that are floating around in the air, falling in there and confusing what you're looking at.
Are you talking about the issue here of cross-contamination and contamination?
Yes. In microbiology, you have to handle specimens. For instance, if a doctor takes a specimen from you, it's very important that that specimen is transported to the lab, handled by the laboratory personnel, analyzed by the laboratory personnel, and that a result is obtained from those personnel in such a way that I can guarantee, number one, the specimen really did come from you, and number two, that there wasn't some sort of mix-up of all the other specimens that came into the lab that day, which is pretty much saying the same thing. And number three, that there isn't a problem with the fact that we're dealing with those microorganisms day after day in the labs, as some of those from the laboratory getting into your specimen and causing a false positive result.
Your thesis involved what microorganism?
I looked at Vibrio cholera, which is the organism that causes cholera, which is an acute diarrheal disease, a major problem worldwide.
And did you do, what was your postdoctoral work and where did you do that?
My postdoctoral work was at, again, UCLA, at this time in the field of virology, and I investigated the genetics and the molecular biology of herpes simplex virus, and specifically asking questions about what it is about that virus that allows it to, once it's into the body, go into what's called a latent stage, which means that the infection is shut down, but the virus persists.
When you say herpes simplex, is that what is commonly known as herpes?
Yes, it causes cold sores, and it also causes a genital infection.
And with whom did you study at UCLA in your postdoctoral work?
Jack Stevens was the individual's name.
And when you say, did you get any kind of a grant at that time?
Yes, the support for my postdoc was a competitive postdoctoral fellowship from the NIH.
But the NIH is?
National Institute of Health.
So you have to compete to get that grant in order to support your postgraduate work?
That's correct.
After that, did you, at some point, when did you move to Denver?
I'm not very good with dates. I believe must have been around 1978 or in that area.
Through 1978, through 1982, where did you work?
I was an assistant professor at the University of Colorado Health Sciences Center, which is a medical school in Denver, Colorado.
And what were you working on there?
I was, again, I had two laboratories. One of the laboratories continued my work with herpes simplex virus, and I was also, the second laboratory involved the investigation of the potential of viruses being the cause of multiple sclerosis.
And when did you go to Immunological Associates of Denver?
That was in 1988.
And at that time, you began to set up the various programs in that laboratory?
That's correct.
Now, I'd like to turn for a second back to your work at IAD and discuss with you some laboratory practices and accrediting and how it works in this field. Are there accrediting agencies that set standards for your DNA laboratory?
Yes.
All right. Could we go through them? Is one of them what's known as CLIA?
Yes.
Could you explain for the jury what that is?
Well, CLIA is actually the law. Clinical Laboratory Improvement Act is that's what the abbreviation stands for. That's a law that was passed to regulate and improve clinical testing in this country. It's administered by Health Care Financing Administration, or HCFA, and we are inspected by that organization to ensure that we are complying with the law.
And you're accredited by them?
And we are, HCFA would be the accrediting agency.
Now, in the course of that, is your lab inspected?
Yes.
Do they look at your protocol?
They do.
Do they look at your quality control and quality assurance documentations?
They do.
Do they do spot checks of your casework?
They do.
Do they they look at your proficiency tests?
They do.
Do they look to see, in the course of their examination of your quality control and quality assurance, whether your laboratory adequately detects and controls contamination in your PCR work?
They do.
Do they inspect your rules for specimen handling?
Yes.
Is there another organization that accredits you called the American Society for Histocompatibility and Immunogenetics?
Yes.
And what is that? That's known as ASHI?
Correct.
And what is their field? What do they look at?
This is the accrediting agency for the purpose of HLA typing.
That's the bone marrow and solid organ
Bone marrow and solid organ transplant.
All right.
Hold on. Doctor, if you would you let the attorney finish asking you the question before you start to answer? Problem is, the court reporter can only take down one person at a time. This is tough stuff for a court reporter.
I understand, I'm sorry.
Proceed.
Does ASHI inspect your lab?
They do.
Do they look through your quality control and quality assurance records?
They do.
Do they do spot checks of your casework?
Yes.
Do they examine proficiency tests?
Yes.
In the course of the examination of the quality control and quality assurance documents and the casework, do they make an assessment as to whether or not your laboratory adequately detects and controls contamination?
Yes.
Do they examine your specimen handling rules and methods?
They do.
What about the National Marrow Donor Program? What do they do?
That is the organization that is the registry for bone marrow.
And do they rely on ASHI inspections?
They rely on ASHI for the accreditation process. Their additional quality control includes blind specimens that are incorporated in every batch of typings we do.
Well, we'll get back to this later, but is that what has been discussed here as an external blind proficiency test?
It is.
All right, we'll discuss that later. Now, what about the American Association of Blood Banks? Is that an accrediting agency that looks at your laboratory?
It is.
And in what area do they look at?
That's in the area of paternity testing by RFLP.
Do they inspect your lab?
They do.
Do they look at your quality control and quality assurance documentation?
Yes.
Do they do spot checks of your casework?
Yes.
Do they review AABB and what's known as CAP, or College of American Pathology proficiency testing?
Yes.
Do they examine chain of custody rules and specimen handling rules?
Everybody's
with
doing
respect to
good, but
paternity
we're all
testing?
They do.
hungry.
Check, would you slow down just a little?
My apologies, Your Honor. In addition to these inspections, what kinds of proficiency testing does your lab go through? Just describe the programs. You mentioned already, and we'll get back to it later, the National Marrow Donor Program external blinds.
That's correct.
Right. What other proficiency testing do you go through?
There's proficiency for virtually every area that we do through the College of American Pathologists, or CAP. That's a major organization. That's one of their major functions, is providing that kind of proficiency testing. In addition, we have proficiency testing through a number of HLA organizations, specifically for DNA HLA. One of them is called the UCLA DNA Exchange, and a second one is the Southeast Organ Procurement Foundation, or CEOP, proficiency testing.
Now, Doctor, are you a member of any professional associations?
I am.
All right. Could you please tell us what they are?
I'm a member of the American Society for Microbiology. I'm a member of the Clinical Ligand Assay Society.
But before the American Society of Microbiology,
Donna.
what is that exactly?
Happy
That
Thanksgiving.
is the major
And your husband.
scientific organization for the purpose of microbiology and molecular microbiology, or molecular pathology.
And they hold meetings and conferences that you attend?
Yes.
And in those meetings and conferences is a discussion of DNA laboratory techniques?
Yes.
All right. Is another professional, go on to your next professional organization.
Clinical Ligand Assay Society is one I believe I mentioned.
And what do they do?
This is an organization, a scientific organization, which is a collection of individuals who are involved in clinical chemistry and clinical testing.
Does that organization hold meetings that you attend?
Yes.
And in those meetings, do various DNA laboratory directors discuss techniques and laboratory methods?
They do.
What other organizations?
The American Association of Blood Banks.
All right. And do you attend their meetings?
Yes.
And at those meetings, do DNA laboratory directors there discuss various techniques that
Yes.
are used in their laboratories?
Yes.
And standards and rules, things of that nature?
Yes.
What about ASHI, the American Society for Histocompatibility and Immunogenetics? I got
Yes. Yes, I belong to that.
that? And what is that organization again?
That is the organization that deals with the immunology of looking at the HLA gene, immunology in general, and the HLA specifically, in the sense of transplantation.
All right, so these are the transplant people, so to speak?
Yes.
And when you get together at those meetings, are there discussions of DNA lab directors there as to techniques and standards in the laboratory?
Yes.
And what is the Pan American Society for Clinical Virology? Is that another organization you're a
It
member
is.
of? And what do they do?
That is the scientific organization, which is a collection of individuals who do virology, looking for viruses in a clinical setting.
And again, at those meetings, do DNA lab directors who do the PCR-based tests for looking for these infectious diseases that you told us about, such as hepatitis, HIV, et cetera, do they discuss DNA laboratory techniques, standards, specimen handling methods?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Now, I'd like to turn your attention now to forensic DNA typing. Have you visited and inspected any forensic DNA laboratories?
Yes.
Which ones have you inspected and visited?
Well, there are 16 of them. Hopefully I can remember the list.
I'm talking first now about visits, labs that
Oh,
you
visits,
visited.
sorry. There are 6 labs that I visited. Cellmark
That's the Cellmark Diagnostics laboratory that
did some
Dr.
testing.
Cotton's from?
That's correct. I visited the Los Angeles Police Department DNA lab. I've visited the Department of Justice in Berkeley.
That's the lab that Gary Sims and Renee Montgomery are from?
Correct. I visited the New Mexico Crime Lab. I visited the Denver Police Department. And I visited the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension in Minneapolis.
Have you visited the laboratory known as Genetic Design?
Yes, I've also visited that in North Carolina.
Now, have you reviewed protocols and casework from additional DNA laboratories?
I have.
And how many DNA laboratories overall have you reviewed protocol and examined casework?
16.
All right. And in addition to Cellmark, the Los Angeles Police Department, the Department of Justice, the New Mexico Police Department, the Denver Police Department, Genetic Design, and the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension in Minneapolis, what other labs have you reviewed their protocols and casework?
You'll have to help me on the list. The FBI, San Diego Police Department, Forensic Science Associates, and if I could look at my CV, it might be,
Well,
or,
if you don't, have you visited GeneScreen?
yeah, I haven't visited. I've reviewed their
Reviewed their
protocol.
casework.
They're from Texas. That's correct.
What about the Orange County Crime Lab?
Yes,
What is the CBR laboratory?
that's a laboratory in Maryland, David Bing's laboratory.
Boston?
Yeah, yes.
And what is AGTC?
Analytical Genetic Testing Center, which is in Denver, Colorado.
So you've reviewed protocol and case from that work?
Yes.
That lab. Have you become familiar with the literature on the application of DNA techniques to forensics?
Yes,
Have you, over the last 5 years, have you testified as an expert witness in a number of states on the application of DNA techniques to forensics?
I have.
And over 5 years, about how many times have you testified?
23 times.
Now, how did you get involved in testifying in cases involving the forensic application of DNA techniques?
Well, back in 1990, there was a case in the Denver area, and as a part of there was DNA involved in the evidence of the case, and one of the attorneys involved in the case, I think he essentially looked us up in the yellow pages, and it said that we did DNA testing, and called me and asked me to look at the evidence, and I agreed to do that and looked at that particular case. I expressed some concerns about specifically some problems that I felt there might be with PCR, and then from there on, individuals have called me.
Now, do you, over the course of time, do you charge money when you review casework and come and testify as a witness?
I do.
And have you charged a fee in this case?
I have.
And what is that fee?
It's $100 an hour.
And who gets the money, this $100 an hour?
The laboratory does.
That's IAD?
Yes.
And is this a money-making enterprise for IAD, you going off and testifying as an expert witness in forensic cases over the last 5 years?
No, it's a minor proportion of the gross income of our company, and it basically covers the expenses of my being gone for someone to replace me.
Now, in terms of preparing for your testimony in this case, did you review the results of the DNA work of the Los Angeles Police Department,
I did.
the Department of Justice,
Yes.
and Cellmark?
Yes,
Have you reviewed their protocols?
I have.
Have you reviewed the collection methods, the sample handling methods, and the laboratory procedures of the Los Angeles Police Department?
Yes.
Have you reviewed what are known as validation studies put together by the Los Angeles Police Department laboratory?
I have.
Have you looked at some of their casework strips
Yes.
and their proficiency tests?
Yes.
I think you've already mentioned you visited the Los Angeles Police Department.
That's correct.
On how many occasions?
2 occasions.
And visited Cellmark in connection with this case.
I did.
And when you said you visited the Department of Justice, that was in connection with another case?
I've visited that laboratory twice, once in conjunction with another case and once in conjunction with this case.
Now, are you familiar with the testimony of Dennis Fung, Andrea Mazzola, Colin Yamauchi, Gary Sims, Renee Montgomery, Robin Cotton in this case?
Yes.
How have you, in what way have you been familiar with it?
Well, I have seen the excerpts here and there on TV, but primarily through transcripts which were provided, and I've reviewed most of those transcripts, although it was impossible to review all of it. I didn't have time, but most of it I've reviewed.
Now, could you please define for the jury the term contamination in a forensic setting in terms of DNA work?
In terms of DNA work, it's quite simply human DNA that's found where it shouldn't be.
Now, in terms of DNA laboratories, would it be useful to break down the kinds of contamination that one encounters?
Yes.
And could you please tell us, could you break those down to us in certain categories?
Certainly. I think a way to look at this is to start all the way back at the beginning at the crime scene. And the first type of risk of contamination is going to be called is called cross-contamination. And as I mentioned, this is human DNA finding its way into a sample where it shouldn't be there. And that's as a result of cross-transferring from one space to another physically. And that can happen by mishandling. And that is because if you have a sample here with a large amount of DNA and another sample with small amount of DNA, this technique is so exquisitely sensitive that you can transfer, without even knowing it frequently, a small amount of DNA from item 1 where there was a large amount to item 2.
When you say exquisitely sensitive, we've heard that term before. What do you mean by that? It's a scientific term.
Yes.
But could you try to define that a little in plainer English if we could?
Yeah, it simply means that you can find a very, very, very small amount. This technique can theoretically find a single copy of what you're looking for.
Okay. Now, discussed cross-contamination. Is there something about cross-contamination that is a particular problem in terms of the different kinds of contamination you get?
Yes, this particular kind of contamination is the one that is the most subversive. And by that I mean that once you've done that, once you've accidentally transferred
Josh,
from one
thanks
item
for
to
the
the next,
cheers. Thank you.
if you were to
thank
do the
you.
DNA analysis of both items, the DNA analysis doesn't distinguish where that human DNA came from. It's simply going to type what human DNA is there. So that means that if you were to type those two items and you had accidentally done that, those items would probably type as the same item. Especially, the smaller amount would be most likely overwhelmed by the transferred DNA. So they would type as the same DNA, meaning coming from the same individual. And it wouldn't matter if at that point, from that point on, it wouldn't matter if this sample that was falsely incorporated the DNA, if that sample was typed by 5, 10 other laboratories or by 5 or 10 different gene systems, it's always going to come up as a match. And the problem with that is there really is no control, unfortunately. There's no way of incorporating into the system a control that says that happened.
Next question.
What other kinds of categories of contamination are there?
Well, the second is usually once the DNA or the specimen is transferred to a laboratory, now you can have the same kind of transfer, by the way. Cross-transfer can happen anytime that item is manipulated, either in the crime scene, in the laboratory itself, or anytime they're handled, those specimens, all the way through the process. That can happen. A second type of contamination, though, that occurs is the fact that when you're dealing with DNA, these samples are fairly dirty samples. In the process of analyzing them, you have to add these liquid solutions that contain all of the building blocks for the DNA and the enzyme that's responsible for allowing us to copy it and the components of that reaction that allows the PCR process to occur.
These are the reagents that you pour into things?
Correct. They're called reagents.
Can they get contaminated?
Yes, they can. Excuse me.
And what is known as amplicon or PCR carryover contamination?
That is a slightly different concept, and the PCR process, I'm sure you're aware of that now, basically allows us to take a small number and copy it, sort of like a molecular Xeroxing up to a very high number. Now, if you do that for the same gene over and over, day after day, with multiple samples, what happens is you have a buildup, or can have a buildup, of the copies. And when you have a buildup of those copies, it's very easy to accidentally get one of those into your reagents or into your reactions. and that's called amplification product carryover.
Okay. Dr. Gerdes, based on your review of the data in this case, have you formed an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty about contamination at the LAPD DNA laboratory?
Objection, no foundation.
Your Honor, my method here is that I'm going to elicit the opinions of the witness and then give the basis for his expert opinion. Have you an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty about contamination at the LAPD DNA laboratory?
Yes.
What is it?
I found that the LAPD laboratory has a substantial contamination problem that is persistent and substantial.
What is it? Chronic? What does that term mean?
Chronic, it is chronic, and it's chronic in the sense that it doesn't go away. I can find it month after month, and it persists.
As a DNA lab director, do you have an opinion about the risk of error due to contamination at the LAPD?
Objection, no foundation.
Sustained.
Oof. That was a blow, guys.
As a molecular biologist and DNA laboratory director, do you have an opinion about the collection, specimen handling, and sampling methods used by the personnel at the Los Angeles Police Department in this case?
Objection, no foundation.
Overruled.
Yes.
And what is it?
I found that the specimen handling procedures were done in such a manner that there's a tremendous risk of the potential of that cross-contamination.
Given your views on contamination at LAPD and the sample handling methods that personnel used, do you have an opinion about the reliability of the results obtained, not only by the Los Angeles Police Department, but by the Department of Justice and Cellmark on the samples that have been called the Bundy blood drops? That is LAPD items 47, 48, 49, 50, and 52.
Objection, no foundation.
Sustained. Sustained.
Your Honor, I wanted to elicit his opinions, then give the
Sustained.
basis.
Sustained.
All right. Dr. Gerdes, have you examined and formed an opinion about the handling of the samples from the Bronco that were collected on June 14th and August 26th in this case?
Objection, no foundation.
Sustained.
Let me go back, try it this way. Dr. Gerdes, have you examined the data and the testimony about how the Bundy blood drops, items 47, 48, 49, 50, and 52, were handled in this case?
Yes.
Have you examined, based on your examination of how those items were handled and your review of the conditions at the LA Police Department laboratory, do you have an opinion about the reliability of the results obtained not only by the Los Angeles Police Department, but by the Department of Justice and Cellmark on those items?
Objection, no foundation.
Sustained.
Have you reviewed, Dr. Gerdes, the D1S80 results obtained on the Rockingham glove by the Department of Justice?
Yes.
All right. And have you reviewed the way that Rockingham glove was handled and sampled by Mr. Yamauchi on the morning of June 14th, 1994?
Yes.
Before we move on to a discussion of those results, I'd like to ask you a series of questions, sir, with the use of a chart, concerning the use of PCR and RFLP technique in the forensic setting and in the medical setting. Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to move the chart out here.
Yes.
So it's still a low blow. That was hurtful. The jury heard all that.
1285.
Dr. Gerdes, if you could step down. Can DNA technology, that is the RFLP and PCR technique, be reliable and validated for one application, but less reliable when transferred to another application?
Objection Foundation requests to take a witness on one here.
Yes, that's called technological transfer. And any specific methodology or way of doing things, when it's used for a different purpose or various different purposes, each of those will have their own unique problems. And so you have to deal with those problems during that transfer.
Where did the RFLP and PCR techniques started? Where were they first developed? In the research setting, the medical setting?
They were, the PCR methodology was developed in a research setting, specifically in the field of molecular biology.
What about RFLP?
RFLP was developed in a similar setting.
And what was the first application of these techniques? Was it medical or forensics?
Well, it began in the research community, and then the medical community was the next area where it was applied, and then finally forensics.
All right, what I'd like to do is go through some of the differences between medical and research applications of these techniques and forensics. First, on the issue of samples, what are the differences as you see them between samples in the medical setting and samples in the forensic setting?
Excuse me again, Objection Foundation, expertise.
Sustain.
Well, Dr. Gerdes, do you have familiarity with the kinds of samples that are handled in the clinical setting?
I do.
And do you have familiarity with the kinds of samples that are handled in forensic casework?
Yes.
What kinds of samples are handled in the medical or research community? And could you describe what they are?
These are aseptically collected, sterile samples that are collected from a patient by a trained microbiologist or medical personnel, transported to the laboratory in a sterile container, and then handled in a sterile environment, a hood that's a sterile hood.
And in forensics, how are, generally speaking, samples, what kinds of samples are you dealing with?
Objection, no foundation, also request to voir dire the witness.
Objection sustained on foundation.
Dr. Gerdes, have you reviewed, how many forensic cases have you reviewed?
23.
And have you reviewed the kinds of samples that were collected in those cases and where they came from?
Objection vague.
Yes, I have.
And where did those samples come from? What kinds of cases did they involve?
They involved various crime scenes. All of them involved, blood, hair, semen found in an unsterile condition on carpets, in
I'm sorry.
dirt.
Excuse me. Objection, no
all over
foundation. Objection, no
I
foundation.
trust
Describe the
DoorDash.
answer.
I DoorDash. I'm a dasher.
Foundation.
I treat their food great.
It's not hearsay at this point.
I move to strike the answer.
I taste all of it to make sure it's
Well-
just kidding. Just kidding.
Have you reviewed literature with respect to forensic samples and their properties and how they're collected?
Yes.
Literature from forensic laboratories?
Yes.
And have you seen photographs and examined actual samples from forensic laboratories in the various cases that you've reviewed?
I've seen photographs. I haven't handled the samples.
In the cases you've reviewed, have you dealt with bloodstains
Yes.
found on various different substrates?
Yes.
Excuse me, objection, no foundation.
From concrete and dirt?
Yes.
Have you dealt with hairs found on clothing and on various substrates?
Yes.
Have you dealt with what are known as vaginal swabs?
Yes.
Sperm and epithelial cells?
Yes.
Saliva?
Yes.
Have you dealt with mixtures of bloodstains?
Yes.
Have you reviewed cases involving mixtures of epithelial and sperm cells, for example?
Yes.
Now, in terms of, and these are all in forensic cases.
They are.
Now, in terms of the samples that you've reviewed in forensic cases, what are the differences between those kinds of samples and the samples that you have encountered in the medical and research setting?
Again, objection, no foundation, expertise.
I believe you've just described the differences. Those samples are found in various substrates, none of which are sterile, obviously sterile blood specimens, and in various stages of degradation and different ages, and they're obviously not clean samples. They're samples that are definitely dirty and definitely not collected in an ideal manner.
Now, in terms of just the application of the technology and the challenge posed by the samples, which kinds of samples, just by their nature, create a higher risk of encountering contamination and erroneous DNA typing? The samples in the medical and research setting or the samples that you've reviewed in forensic casework?
Well, obviously, if you have a sterile sample that's aseptically collected versus a sample where there's absolutely no way of controlling how it's collected or where it's found, the chances of foreign DNA from someone else are going to be much greater in this situation than in this situation.
So would it be fair to say that in terms of risk of contamination error, at least just in terms of the samples, forensics is a greater challenge?
It is.
Would it be fair for you then to, if there were a box here, would you check that off with respect to dirty samples?
It's stuck on.
It's stuck on permanently?
Yes. That one is.
Sorry, revealing its check mark. In terms of sample
Spoilers,
size, what are the
now we
differences
know.
between the samples that you encounter in the medical area, the clinical area, and the samples that you've reviewed in forensic casework?
In the medical area, we can pretty much request the sample volume that we need. So sample size is not a problem. You ask for the ideal amount of material you need to do the testing.
Now, in terms of amounts, incidentally, in other words, are some of these DNA tests best performed when you can actually quantitate the amount of DNA?
All of them are, yes.
Is that particularly important in PCR testing?
Yes.
What are the recommended amounts for the DQ alpha PCR technique in terms of the minimum amount of DNA that you'd like to have in a sample?
Objection, no foundation.
Sustained.
Do you know, are you familiar with the DQ alpha reverse dot blot method?
Yes.
You're familiar with the literature concerning that technique?
Yes.
The user guide?
Yes.
Is there anything in that literature, the user guide, that indicates what the preferred amount is? For example, in terms of minimum size for doing a DQ alpha reverse dot blot analysis?
Yes.
And what would that be?
The minimum amount that's recommended is 2 nanometers.
And
2 nanometers.
what about the D1S80 technique? Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the literature surrounding that technique?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the user guide and the protocol for that technique?
Yes.
Now, in terms of, so you were getting back to the issue of sample size. You said that in the medical setting, you can control the amounts of DNA that's being tested. Is that correct?
That's correct. You can ask for an ample size of the original sample, you can purify the DNA, and you can quantitate precisely the amount, and therefore add the ideal
Nina, happy
concentration
Thanksgiving.
needed for the particular test.
Now, in terms of sample size, in your review of the evidence in this case and in other forensic cases, does the same situation obtain in terms of the availability of sample?
Objection vague.
Sustained.
What kinds of amounts of samples
going to get my
have
coffee,
you encountered
be
in
right
this
back.
case and in other cases as compared to the amounts in the medical and research setting?
Same objection.
Overruled.
In this case and in other cases, frequently you have very, very small amounts of DNA, and that's basically because you take what you get. You have no option. You have to work with whatever's there. And so frequently that's very, very small amounts, less than what is ideal and less than what is recommended for these kinds of tests.
In terms of the risk of contamination and erroneous typing, are there greater risks associated with the kinds of small samples that one encounters in forensic casework than in the medical, the generous sample size in the clinical context?
Objection, no foundation.
Sustained. Doctor, let me ask you to take the longer pointer and step back one step so that the court reporter can hear what you're saying.
Does sample size have anything to do with the problem of contamination and erroneous typing?
Objection vague.
Overruled.
Yes, sample size, if it's too small, there is an increased risk of contamination. There's an increased risk that you will miss some of the DNA. That is, something's there and you don't find it.
All right. And in your judgment, do the minuscule size, what does the term minuscule mean?
Small, very small.
Okay. And is that the kind of sample you're talking about that's encountered in forensic casework?
Yes.
All right. Now, does the minuscule sample size encountered in forensic casework, what implication does that have for you, as far as you're concerned, in terms of the risk of contamination and error as compared to the clinical setting?
Objection, no foundation.
Overruled.
It's a tremendously increased risk of contamination and error.
Now, in the clinical context, in terms of mixtures, what kinds of samples do you get there as opposed to forensic casework?
Well, in the clinical setting, for the vast majority of the types of tests we do, we are concerned with a specimen or a sample that comes from one individual. And So it's very rare that we will work with something that is a mixture.
And what about the sources of those samples?
The sources are well known to be a single individual.
In the forensic context, and in this case, what kinds of samples are often encountered?
Most of the times in a forensic case, obviously you're finding something at a crime scene. So you have no way of knowing whether that came from only one individual, one contributor, two contributors, three contributors. You have no way of really knowing how many people that might have actually come from. And that means that you don't know if you have a mixture, and then when you do the analysis, frequently it's found to be a mixture.
And in terms of the risk of contamination and error, in which application of DNA techniques is the risk of contamination and error greater just because of the nature of that sample?
It's much greater in the forensic setting. It's very, very difficult. It's a difficult task to deal with these mixtures because the genetic systems are more precise and can be interpreted more cleanly if you know you're only working with one person.
Would it be fair to check off this spot?
Yes.
Now, in terms of handling of samples within a laboratory, could you compare for us which of the applications has more or less handling of samples within the laboratory?
Objection, no foundation.
Sustained.
All right. Are you familiar with the specimen handling techniques in clinical laboratories?
Yes.
Have you examined the specimen handling techniques used by the Los Angeles Police Department in this case?
I have.
Are you familiar with the techniques used by some ARC in the Department of Justice?
Michael.
Are you familiar with the
Happy
specimen handling
Thanksgiving.
techniques used by the other
Carlos,
laboratories
happy
that you visited?
Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And these are all forensic laboratories,
They are.
dealing with forensic samples.
Yes.
All right. Which laboratory does more or less handling of the samples in the course of doing DNA testing?
There's much,
Objection, no foundation.
there's much more handling in the forensic setting. Those specimens are, because they're found at a crime scene and in a non-sterile situation, they have to be handled, itemized, packaged, transported to the lab, and then sorted out so that they can be analyzed, perhaps reserving perhaps some for future analysis by both the defense and the prosecution in a case. And then they have to be handled from a non-sterile state from the very beginning, because they're found that way. In a clinical lab, we can work with one specimen in a sterilely drawn tube that was transported to the lab, immediately goes right into the testing process, and it's not handled for anything other than that.
Now, in terms of the risk of contamination and error, where is it greater? In the situation where there's less handling of the sample, or in the situation where the forensic situation where the samples have to be taken from the scene, dried, unpackaged, dried, packaged again, opened again, cut up again, etc.?
That's
Risk
how
is
they get
tremendously
you.
greater in the forensic setting.
Now, in this connection, in the clinical area, do you have occasion to do what's known as split samples for independent testing with other laboratories?
Occasionally we do that, yes.
All right. And when you're dealing with sensitive PCR kinds of testing, how is a sample split or put aside for independent testing by another laboratory?
Well, the ideal situation would be at the time that the specimen is collected, we would collect two tubes. And one would be transported directly to laboratory 1, and the other is transported directly to laboratory 2. There's no possible contact between those two labs.
Is the idea, in terms of the handling, when you're doing a split for an independent laboratory analysis, is the idea to minimize the exposure or handling of that sample in laboratory 1?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, as I explained earlier, this problem of cross-contamination, if that becomes an issue, then if you have designed the entire way in which the sample was tested in such a way that it is impossible, absolutely impossible, for laboratory 1, their specimens to have come in contact with laboratory 2, or vice versa, then by the very design of the way you set it up, it eliminates that whole argument.
All right. Now, in terms then again of minimal handling and multiple handling, is it your testimony there's a higher risk of contamination and error in the forensic application?
Yes.
I'd like to turn to the question of error. I think it'll go faster here. I can finish this board and then take a break. Would that be fair? You want a break right now?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our mid-morning break at this time. Please remember all of my admonitions to you. We'll stand in recess for 15 minutes. All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter. All parties are again present. Jury is not present. All right, Deputy McNair, let's have the jurors, please.
One item, if I might.
I'm sorry. Mr. Clark.
During testimony of Dr. Curtis, he brought up the fact that he had been granted certain funds as a result of a proposal
Michael's gonna eat a turducken today.
newer or better
He's busy right now just shoving
during the break.
everything inside each other.
About the availability of that proposal. I was informed by Dr. Curtis that there would be no problem providing a one-page copy of the grant that contains an abstract of the proposal, but that as to the proposal, Dr. Curtis explained that there was a proprietary interest in that would not be available to the people. It's our request that that be provided, and I think it's very relevant for this case,
Well,
for reasons that I can give the court here.
we have offered to make Dr. Gerdes available to explain in great detail anything that Mr. Clark wants to ask him about the proposal and the technique. And I'd have to consult with him further about what the legalities are in terms of the proprietary nature of it.
All right. Why don't you confer over the lunch hour on that issue?
Speaking of charts.
All right, and what one of the
Michael.
court's available remedies in these
Michael.
issues is to issue a protective order if anything like that is produced.
What is your
And
sign?
that the copy not be copied. and
Tell me
be
what your
returned to the court's
horoscope sign
custody
is.
upon review, and that it be kept here in the courtroom.
We'll see, maybe we can...
All right, I'm sure we can accomplish that. All right. All right, Deputy McNair, let's have the jurors, please.
Guys, give me your signs. I'm gonna look up horoscope.com or something and tell you what kind of day you're gonna have. Give me your signs. I'll start with mine since there's a delay. I'm a Capricorn, so relationships will be positive and stable. No, they won't today. With mutual trust and affection growing. Your work and professional life may involve making realistic and well thought out plans. That is me to a T. You can expect a favorable time for wealth accumulation and asset planning. Oh my gosh. Okay. Virgo. A strong band of loyalty that you feel for a friend might propel you into a touchy situation today. Your friend may ask you to do a favor that's
That all the jurors have now
difficult,
rejoined us.
if not impossible. Look into the situation and see if there's some way you can help. If not, you'll have to try to make it up later. Sometimes that's all you can do. Hey Josh, can I have $6,000? I like these horoscopes. They're great. Aries. Something may be distracting a close friend or a love partner. So, I got a pop-up. So much that this person isn't very good company. Nor will your friend want to share the source of their preoccupation. Don't try to have a long conversation about it. Back off and let your friend come to terms with it alone. Yep, ditch your friends. Ditch them, especially when they need help. This is just for fun, Salty. This doesn't mean anything. Nobody's up here believing anything that I'm saying. Nobody. Aquarius. It may be difficult to focus on household chores today. Ha! Don't clean. Your mind is on more exalted matters. I know who you're thinking about. Such as spiritual and intellectual interests, and you feel lazy. It's okay to do nothing. You don't have to knock yourself out every day. Every day you try so hard. Relax at home, read, watch TV, and cook if you must do something, your chores can wait until you feel more energetic. Scorpio. Some bizarre dreams or visions may come to you today. Hallucinating. You're going to be hallucinating. Man. Don't put too much stock in them. You might find that the images are partly scenes from your past, partly information you've received today, and partly your own fears about the future. If you view them this way, you should be able to see what they're telling you. They aren't prophecies for the future, because it's not going to happen. But if it did happen, then it wouldn't be. Sagittarius, Nina. Information you receive from friends could have you worrying a little about your financial security. Ask Josh for money. It's fine. You may be trying to reach a goal that seems to be in jeopardy. I'm always trying to reach a goal that's in jeopardy. Rent, electric, gas. If the news you've heard is true, it may not be. Check the facts before jumping to conclusions and panicking. You can find there's just really nothing to worry about. I think we did it all. I got everybody. Now we know. Now we know that Nan's going to be hallucinating all day. That's what we learned from today. Nan is hallucinating.
Dr. John Gerdes is on the witness stand undergoing direct examination by Mr. Scheck. Mr. Scheck, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Gerdes, let's turn to the issue of error rates. How are errors known? How do you learn about errors in the clinical context?
Well, one way to determine if an error has been made in a clinical lab is by and through the proficiency testing. As the NMDP program, as I explained earlier, that's blind proficiency testing. And what that means is every week, if we have 60 samples that are sent to us to be typed, 10 of them are incorporated as controls, and we don't know which 10 those are. And then during the course of our typing, if we make errors, that will pick up the error immediately.
But are there other, besides proficiency testing, which we'll discuss a little bit more in a moment, are there other ways that a clinical laboratory finds out, such as your own and others that you're familiar with, that it made a mistake, an error?
Well, again, in the case of bone marrow transplantation, as I explained, if we give marrow to a recipient that doesn't match, the patient comes down with graft versus host disease and can die because there was an incorrect match. So in the clinical setting, a mistake is fairly drastic.
So in other words, would it be fair to say this, that in the clinical setting, you do a DNA typing, bone marrow, solid organ transplant, and post-transplant infectious disease screening, and if your laboratory made a mistake, that would become known because of an actual outcome with the patient, and you'd hear about it.
That's correct.
And you'd really hear about it, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in the context of a forensic test, is there a difference in terms of finding out whether or not an error has been made in a case? Or how easy is that to determine?
It's extremely difficult because in the legal system, we depend upon the jury to decide what's truth and what's not true. So it's really, there's no independent way of confirming whether the correct decision was made or not.
Well, put another way, in terms of the forensic labs as opposed to the clinical labs, there's no independent outcome, objective independent outcome that you can make a comparison to. Would that be a fair statement? So would you agree that in that respect, the error weights are not as well known?
No one knows what your age is, Michael. What is your age?
In terms of your examination of the laboratory standards in clinical laboratories, in terms of the protocols, procedures, and the standards set out by accrediting agencies, compared to the 23 forensic labs that you've looked at, which has the higher laboratory standards in terms of specimen handling and basic fundamental DNA techniques?
In a clinical lab, we have, as I mentioned, a number of agencies that inspect us. We're always being inspected. These agencies, there are mandatory guidelines, mandatory requirements, there are laws that we have to follow, so the standards are fairly high, and they're mandated to be high by law. In a forensic laboratory, there isn't a similar organization that has mandatory accreditation for those kinds of laboratories. So
Now, at
there are
the-
lower standards in the forensic lab.
The ASCLD program, to your understanding, is that's a voluntary program?
It's voluntary.
And I think there's been testimony in this case that
Very,
DOJ and
very,
Cellmark are
very
credited, but
often.
the LAPD is
You're
not. Is that
probably
your
peeing right
understanding?
now and don't even know it.
Now, in terms of proficiency testing, you began to tell us before. Could you tell us briefly a little bit more about that National Bone Marrow Donor Transplant Program? How many samples does your lab get a month?
At the present time, we're getting 200 actual samples a month, of which 40 are controls that are incorporated into what comes into the lab, and we don't know which 40 are the controls.
So you think that the all 60 samples that you're getting that month that you have to do DNA typing on, you think that's a regular case?
They're not marked in any way. We know 10 of them are controls, but we don't know which 10.
And in terms of the definitions that we've been using in this case, would you, is that an external blind proficiency test? That is, it's done by an outside agency, and the laboratory is blind, that is to say, you don't know whether it's a real case or not.
That's true.
You also undergo what we called open proficiency tests.
Thanksgiving.
That is, you know you're being tested in your sent samples.
I
Is
gotta
that
clean
correct?
this up from
And have
our
you
lab.
reviewed the proficiency tests that have been done by LAPD, DOJ, and Cellmark and other forensic laboratories?
I have.
All right, and in terms of the proficiency tests themselves, the kinds of samples received and the nature of it, in your judgment, which is more rigorous, the clinical proficiency tests you've described or the forensic proficiency tests that you've reviewed of LAPD, Cellmark, et cetera?
Well, in order for a proficiency test to be realistic, it should really mimic exactly what you're trying to test as far as an ability for a lab to do something.
Wah.
So what you attempt to do is design these samples to be exactly like what you're claiming to test. And in a clinical setting, that means that the samples
I
that are sent to
found
us
out
are
today,
essentially,
if I get iced
identical to a
coffee
patient sample, and it
instead
comes
of
in
hot
and
coffee,
into our
I can
normal
get
run
32
for that
ounce
day, our
cups.
normal testing for that day, and then
Yes, sir.
treated in the same way, and you report the
I'm
results
so
just like
happy.
you would any patient. In the forensic setting, that's a little more difficult because of the fact that, remember,
Yeah, I
these
realized the
samples
rest of it is ice. I know, I'm
you
not
know,
stupid, but it's still 32
variety
ounces.
of states, conditions, places where they were found, how old they are, what they were exposed to in terms of humidity and temperature and length of time. And so it's extremely difficult to mimic that on all different kinds of varieties of specimens that you might do. And mixtures are another problem. You should really do the hardest possible type of specimen to get an idea about the maximum error rate when you have the hardest test.
Well, Dr. Gerdes,
That would be a degraded mixed specimen with very little DNA, for instance.
are those kinds of samples done in the proficiency tests that were performed by LAPD, Cellmark, and DOJ?
Objection, no foundation.
Sustained.
Have you reviewed the CTS and CAP proficiency tests that were done by LAPD in this case?
Yes,
Have you reviewed them, some that were done by DOJ?
Yes.
Have you reviewed some of Cellmark's tests?
yes.
All right. In your judgment, in terms of the nature of proficiency tests, which are more rigorous, the clinical or the forensic?
Same objection.
Sustained.
In terms of the samples that are given to the
There's an
laboratories
orange
for
right here,
proficiency
Nan,
tests,
right
which are
there.
more rigorous, the ones encountered in the clinical work or the forensics?
Same objection.
Sustained. Counsel, the problem is the testimony was the same for some of the proficiency tests. I don't know what range. He may have looked at one proficiency test
Oh.
per lab. That doesn't tell me anything.
All right. How many proficiency, have you looked at every proficiency test done by the LAPD?
Yes.
All right. Have you looked, how many proficiency tests did you look at from the Department of Justice?
I can't remember a precise number. It was somewhere in the range of between 6 and 10.
All right. And incidentally, are these were the Department of Justice and LAPD doing some of the same tests?
Yes,
In other words, the CTS and CAP tests that they were doing are the same, precisely the same samples?
but sent to different labs, yes.
Okay. Now, in terms of what you reviewed in those laboratories, and comparing that to the clinical tests you're familiar with, which would you say, in terms of the samples, are the more rigorous ones, more rigorous proficiency tests?
Same objection.
In the proficiencies that I saw, all of those proficiency tests involved unmixed blood specimens from known individuals or easier types of specimens.
Back
not-
then,
none
I
of
could
them
get
related to
glasses
So you would say the
So I would
forensics?
say-
that had like blue on the top,
You're going to have to
And
stop talking at the same time.
pink on the
especially when you
bottom,
check.
so it looked
Slow
like I
down.
had blush and eyeshadow on.
Court reporter's writing me a
They were
message.
really cool. Totally cool.
Finally, Dr. Gerdes,
Totally tubular.
Are you familiar with the use of statistics in terms of DNA tests?
Yes.
Are you an expert in population genetics?
No.
Are you a user
Who
of
all
some
is
of those
cooking
statistics?
turkey today?
Are you aware
Who all is
of
cooking?
statistical controversies in terms of, well, withdrawn, let me put it this way. To your knowledge, in terms of the DNA test results in the clinical setting, is there any controversy over statistics
There is.
in the clinical setting?
Oh, in the clinical setting? I'm sorry. In the clinical setting, for the majority of the testing we do in that setting, there's no statistics involved.
When you say no statistics involved, what do you mean?
Well, the kinds of questions you would ask, for instance, if we're doing HLA, we're asking the question is, we have two individuals, or do they have precisely the same HLA? And you have the two individuals right there, so you don't have to calculate what chance it
Like, oh my
that
God.
would happen in the population, because you know what two individuals you're looking at. You're either looking at a known person who needs that transplant, and you're looking at a donor, and you know both of those people.
Are you aware, in forensics, I take it, one uses databases to calculate statistics.
Yes.
Are you aware of the statistical controversy in forensics?
Objection, I'm sorry, no foundation calls for hearsay, also assumes facts, not an evidence.
He can say yes or no, he's aware of it.
Are you aware of it?
I'm aware of it.
Incidentally, Doctor, have you reviewed the report on DNA technology and forensic science by the National Research Council?
Yes.
Do you regard that as an authoritative text?
Yes.
Do you rely upon the conclusions in that text?
Yes.
And have you read the section there dealing with statistical controversy? Just
Yes.
fact. All right, I believe we're finished with this board.
Michael, are you having Thanksgiving?
Dr. Gerdes, did you conduct an examination of DQ alpha hybridization strips at the Los Angeles Police Department that began on May 20th, 1993, strips that from May 20th, 1993 through August 25th, 1994?
I did.
And could you please tell us what kinds of data these strips came from? Or did you get these from the prosecution?
Yes, they were provided.
Did you go to the lab and look at some of them?
I did.
All right. Were you provided something that were known as LAPD validation studies?
Yes.
What were those?
Well, LAPD, when they first set this up in May of 1993, they collected specimens from...
I'm sorry, objection, no foundation.
Sustained.
All right. Did you receive documentation from the Los Angeles Police Department entitled validation studies?
There is a cover page that discusses that they looked at various specimens for the purpose of validation. I don't think it was really titled validation studies, but I have called it that, and they use it as on that page it discusses using these specimens for the purpose of validation.
Your Honor, I show the witness what's previously been marked as Defense 1181A.
All right, are you showing that to Mr. Clark?
Actually, while we're at it, 1181B as well.
All right. Yep, wait.
You said Clark.
Clark and Clark. Thank you.
Yes.
And just briefly put those in the honor to remind the jury what we're looking at. So this is a document entitled PCR Method Validation Training Record.
Yes, I didn't recall that they actually titled it as such. It looks like they did.
And
Give the
and
pups some
1181
turkey.
is, represents what?
This is a list of some of the standards, the individuals that they use for the validation.
So in other words, What they're indicating here is that a series of blood stains, saliva from swabs and cigarette butts, hair, blood, saliva, and hair sets, mock vaginal swabs, 9 known blood stains, family studies. These are known samples that were then sent out to the analyst to type. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it indicates here that all the above validation work was performed by Aaron Riley and Colin Yamauchi, and every validation sample either gave the expected typing result or no typing result was observed. At no time was an incorrect typing result observed.
That's what it says.
All right. Now, did you review all the hybridization strips based on this PCR validation set of samples from the LAPD?
I did.
All right. And did you review as well all the LAPD proficiency test strips from their internal tests, from the proficiency tests from the Collaborative Training Service, and the College of American Pathology?
Yes.
Objection, no foundation.
Did you review samples that were received by LAPD from what is called their Korean database?
Yes.
All right. And that is blood samples from people that are self-described to be Koreans that they typed. Is that right?
That's correct.
Did you look at casework strips during this period of May 1993 to August 1994?
There were some casework strips, yes.
All right. Did you look at as many as you were permitted to
I
see?
looked at everything they gave me.
And when you evaluated the casework strips,
I'm not putting up plates.
on the proficiency
I'm not
tests,
this
the
year.
validation studies,
Nope.
and the Korean database
I didn't last year
samples,
either.
did you know that the sources of those samples?
Yes.
So they're known types, is that correct?
They're standards. That's correct.
Standards. Now, in the casework, when you looked at the various strips from casework, did you know the source of every one of those samples in a set of casework strips?
No.
Which strips would you know in a casework sample came from a known source?
That would be the positive control and the negative controls from that particular case. And any sample that was referred to as a reference sample would have been known to have come or defined to have been derived from one individual.
All right, let's just review it now for a second. The positive control, is that the 1.1/4 DNA sample that comes with the DQ alpha kit?
That's correct.
The negative control, or the negative controls, there's 2 kinds of negative controls?
Yes.
All right. One kind is what's known as the extraction control. That would be a sample that is not supposed to contain DNA.
Yeah, the extraction control consists of basically using the substrate, which would be a control swab or a piece of cloth that is run through the DNA extraction process all the way through to the typing process, and it controls for foreign DNA that might have been incorporated or accidentally introduced into that test during those procedures.
And is there another control that is introduced at the end of the process when you amplify up the DNA?
Yes.
That's called a negative amplification control?
An amplification blank, some people call it a water control. It basically does not go through the procedures involved in extracting DNA. It is incorporated at the stage where you copy the DNA or amplify the DNA, and so it only controls for the accidental incorporation of DNA at that stage.
Now,
That's
a known
savage.
reference sample in a case would be, let's say, in a
That's so mean.
sexual assault case, if they took a sample from the victim, that would be a blood sample, that would be considered a known. Is that right?
It's considered to have come from one individual.
And
I wouldn't know the type, the anticipated type, but it is, I think, it's safe to assume that is defined to have been obtained from a single individual. Should not be a mixture.
When you're looking at a DQ alpha strip from a reference sample in casework from a known individual, you should see no more than 2 alleles, or
2, that's correct.
2. If you see 3 alleles,
That's an indication that it has to be a mixture, or in this case, since it was defined as having come from one individual, if you have an indication of 3 there, then that has to be contamination. It has to be foreign DNA that was incorporated or somehow got into that sample.
all right, so when you looked at the casework strips from LAPD, you were examining to see whether there was contamination?
Yes.
And you would determine that by looking at the positive controls that come with the kit, known reference samples, and the negative controls.
Correct.
All right. And incidentally, if you get a dot, something showing up in the negative control, does that indicate contamination?
Absolutely.
All right. So, did you conduct an analysis of all these strips from the validation studies, the proficiency tests, the Korean database, and all the casework samples that you could see at the LAPD from May of 1993 when they started to August of 1994.
I did.
And what I'd like to do now, Your Honor, is put up a chart, and also, Doctor, do you have a set of strips that would illustrate how you read them and went through your analysis to determine contamination?
Yes.
All right. And I've shown this previously, Mr. Park. You can mark the strip, defendant's next in order.
1286, Mr. Robinson. 1286.
I don't mind doing the kitty litter, but they just eat so much. I feel like I'm feeding animals more than I'm feeding me or my kids who are adults and can feed them themselves, but I still feed them. Oh yeah, Josh, you have to. I'm going to give Joshua a lot of turkey today. Extra from you. A whole lot of extra from you.
All right, we'll mark this chart next in order 1287. This is called strips % of contamination and/or artifacts. Mr. Scheck.
Yes, first maybe we could pull up and look at the entire sheet here. Describe for us what this is generally.
All right, we're gonna
Is
get.
this the way you were? Is this the form in which you received
Hold on,
most of this data?
Check is
Yes.
talking.
Right. And
Nope, now he's done. The plane, the plane. Stop. The plane. Because he's very tiny. All right, guys. We did it. We are in the 380s, by the way, in case you were wondering. We are in the 380s. So just a few more videos, and we will be within 100 videos of the end. Isn't that crazy that I just said that out loud? All right, it's Thanksgiving. Guys, go be with your family. Depending on how my night goes, I might do a members only later tonight for people who are, are just like bummed out because it's Thanksgiving and things went shitty today, whatever. But it's a great case, but there's no video because shit happened when I tried to record it, and it just recorded like this Inception type. It doesn't matter. So we might do a live later today, just to be with each other, and we're gonna have a video. We're gonna have an audio playing in the background. It's gonna be members only because I can't show the public a video with no video. I'm a professional. But just if you're lonely later, Micah, we'll be thinking of you too. Nan, if you start hallucinating, please type in chat what you see. I want to know what you see. Josh, I'm waiting for that money. Thanks. All right, guys, go eat turkey. Get out of here. Have a great day, guys. Bye.